Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high. Don't be a jerk, you're not that great. I can read books. Reading radio.
Hello and welcome to show 6 of Reading Radio, normally on KWCW 90.5 FM, Walla Walla. This week being podcasted from a lambskin rug in College Place, Washington. I'm Julian Weller.
And I'm Mackenzie Kessler.
We've got some great books, children's books for you this week. First one will be
The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter.
Read by Mackenzie, and I'm going to read the footbook by Dr. Seuss. We'll have an inspirational music break, and then resume our readings of Who Could That Be at This Hour by Lemony Snicket, part of his All the Wrong Questions series. That'll be Chapter 6. And Mackenzie.
I will be reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by JK, if you didn't know.
Normally, we'd be broadcast live, but Whitman College, who hosts KWCW, is on spring break right now, so not being students, we can't get into the station. So here's a podcast. Hopefully you like it.
And this is The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there, and he was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along, and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella, and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net, and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in, if it hadn't not been so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Kerchoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him, Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out, and climbed upon a wheelbarrow, and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow, and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. And that was The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter.
Awesome. I remember hearing that when I was little. This is The Foot Book by Dr. Seuss. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right. Feet in the morning, feet at night. Left foot, left foot, left foot, right. Wet foot, dry foot, low foot, high foot. Front feet, back feet, red feet, black feet. Left foot, right foot, feet, feet, feet. How many feet you meet. Slow feet, quick feet, trick feet, sick feet, up feet, down feet. Here come clown feet. Ugh. Small feet, big feet. Here come pig feet. His feet, her feet, fuzzy fur feet. In the house and on the street, how many feet you meet. Up in the air feet, over a chair feet, more and more feet. 24 feet. Here come more and more and more feet. Left foot, right foot, feet, feet, feet. Oh, how many feet you meet. That was The Foot Book by Dr. Seuss. Probably his greatest work of all time. And
so many feet.
I think we have time for another kid's book.
Yes.
So we will read
Julius, with the story and pictures by Syd Hoff. Davy went to Africa. His father was going to catch an animal for the circus. Do you want a giraffe? Said Davy. No, said Mr. Smith. How about a lion? Said Davy. No, said Mr. Smith. Will an elephant do? Said Davy. No, said his father. I'm sorry, what we want is a gorilla, said Mr. Smith. Some animals have all the luck, said the lion, giraffe, and elephant. Davy couldn't wait to see a gorilla. He had never seen one. It's time to rest, said Mr. Smith. I'm not even tired, said Davy. Everybody took a nap. Davy could not sleep. Davy found a coconut. He kicked it into the bushes. Someone kicked it back to him. Who's in there? Said Davy.
I am,
Said a voice. You're a strange-looking person, said Davy.
I'm not a person,
Said the voice.
I'm a gorilla. My name is Julius.
They shook hands. Davy squeezed hard.
Ouch! You have a strong grip,
said the gorilla. Would you like to play football? Said Davy.
I'd love to,
said Julius. Davy showed Julius how to throw a pass. He showed him how to catch one, too. Julius tackled Davy.
Now you tackle me,
said Julius. No, thank you, said Davy. Look, I found a new friend, said Davy.
My name is Julius,
said Julius. Won't you join us for dinner? Said Mr. Smith. Julius had good table manners. He knew which fork and spoon to use. He made no noise when he ate his soup.
I hear you're looking for a gorilla, sir. Will I do?
asked Julius. I was hoping you would ask, said Mr. Smith. Of course, we'll be glad to have you. The men carried Julius through the woods. Sometimes Julius gave the men a rest. Goodbye, said all the animals. On the ship, Julius made new friends. The food is good, isn't it? Said a lady.
They could give us more bananas,
said Julius. I want a fur blanket too, said a man. At last the trip was over. Look me up in Boston, said a person.
Look me up in the circus,
said Julius. Don't you like cars? Said Davy.
I'd rather swing,
said Julius. You must be the new gorilla, said the circus man.
How did you know?
said Julius. We work here too, said the clowns and seals.
I'm proud to be part of the team,
said Julius. Everybody rushed to see Julius. He looks so strong. I hope he can't get out of that cage, said the people. Nobody could get out of there, said someone.
Why should I get out?
said Julius.
I like it here.
A fly came into the cage. I think I'll annoy that gorilla, he said. Buzz, 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 said the fly. Clear the runway. I'm coming in for a landing. He landed on Julius's nose.
I'll have to ask you to leave,
said Julius.
My nose is not an airport,
he added.
Kindly take off.
The fly did not listen. He stayed right there. Julius shook his hand at the fly. Thanks for making me nice and cool, said the fly. It's so warm in here.
I'll try scaring him,
said Julius. He jumped up and down. The gorilla is gonna get out, said the people. They ran away.
Oh dear,
said Julius.
I scared everybody else.
Tell them to come back, said the circus man, and don't get lost.
I'll try,
said Julius. The circus people waited and waited. There was no sign of Julius. Something happened to him, said the seals. Let's go look for him, said the clowns. Do you see him? said the fat lady. I don't see anything, said the thin man. Have you seen someone with lots and lots of hair? said Mr. and Mrs. Tiny. Is there anybody in that tree besides you? said the giant. Gorillas should be easy to find, said the wire walker. Not this one, said the acrobats. Let's go to Davy's house, said the circus people. Maybe he knows where Julius is. Davy was playing football. Julius is lost, said the people. Have you seen him? No, said Davy. But once I kicked a coconut into the bushes and Julius kicked it back. Try it again, said the circus people. Davy kicked his football into the bushes. Someone kicked it back. Julius! cried everyone.
Oh, I'm so glad you found me. I was lost,
said Julius.
Please take me back to the circus. I love it there.
Let's go, said the circus people. The clowns got ready. They gave Julius a mirror, too. We love to look at the gorilla, said everybody.
I love to look at him, too,
said Julius. The end. And that was Julius with Stories and Pictures by Syd Hoff.
Now it is time for our inspirational song break. When we get back, we will resume reading our chapter books, and the inspirational song for the week is Hey Young World by Nas, and he is covering Slick Rick's version from the 80s.
The
The World Is Yours is something I got from Slick Rick back in the days. Hey young world, the world is yours, from the movie Scarface, where his whole thing is the world is yours. He even sort of bluntly said the world is yours out there in the sky, and he looked at it as something from God, like, telling him, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Young world, the world is yours. Young people are so special. It's so good when God bless you. Deaf to unethical thoughts that suppress you. Like diseases, they conjure up inside a test tube to stress you. Bureaucratic genocide, but maybe I'm a recluse. It's just my observation as a whole. Human extermination, population control. Assuming my generation is young and out of control. But y'all don't understand this, y'all out of touch and you're old. I promise to stay forth, try to stay on course and right the wrongs of my father with my baby boy. Life is long, the problems just don't go away when ignored. Life is long, it's important that it's played like a sport. Every skyscraper you see started off as a thought. And Ricky Waters told me, yo, the world could be yours. So hey young world, yeah, hey young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world is yours. Young world, the world is yours. You could have been arrested, locked down, doing 10 on a Fed bid. But you home, so you know you blessed, kid. But trust me, I know some people who are not as lucky. Cause on a small drug beef, going 15 years, it must be conspiracies to kill a sea, no liberty or justice. Congress talk nonsense, it's consignment for us hustlers. There's no 401k retirement for us hustlers. It's one way until death. Who die young is bum luck. Young bruh, tell me why you want war. Told a gun for whoever come forth with tough talk get done off. New York City streets, they carry the worst gun law. But still it's real, we do it with tools. So on guard, under the code of the hood, play your role. Maybe you live to get old. Kids and a wife and household. Slow your roll before your soul ejects from your body, man. You turn cold. Take advice, yo. Take the higher roll. Hey, young world. Yeah. Hey, young world. Yeah. It goes. Hey, young world. The world is yours. Hey, young world. The world is yours. Young world, the world is yours. It goes. Hey, young world. The world is yours. Hey, young world. The world is yours. Young world, the world is yours.
All right, you're still listening to Reading Radio, podcasted, not at all live from a lambskin rug. Since we missed last week, I'll recap a little extra from our first chapter book of the night, Lemony Snicket's Who Could That Be at This Hour? 2 chapters back, chapter 4, Lemony went to the library to research the abominating beast and confirm the Malahans' claim that the statue has been in their family for generations, but Mrs. Murphy Salas has still hired Lemony and his chaperone, S. Theodora Markson, to steal it for her from the Malahans because she claims it has always been in her place and they've stolen it recently. Lemony met the librarian, Dashiell Quirty, and the jerky nuisance Stu, the awful child. He returns to the Lost Arms to be confronted by the officers Mitchum, the police force of Stained by the Sea, who, it turns out, are the parents of Stu. They bicker, and later, as Theodora Markson tells Lemony that Mrs. Salas has called the hotel and the re-theft of the abominating beast statue will occur that night. Lemony will infiltrate the lighthouse, steal it from the Malahans, and lower himself on the hawser cable back to the Salas mansion, where he'll be met by the butler, with a candle in the upper window. So here's the last page of chapter 5 of All the Wrong Questions. Oh, and Lemony has taken a cab manned by the brothers Pip and Squeak. I shut the door behind me and gave the window of the cab a knock goodbye. Pip waved and the taxi drove off. I waited until the sound of the engine had faded and then stood for a moment looking up at the lighthouse. I hoped the same thing the two substitute drivers of Belleferon taxi hoped, that I knew what I was doing. I doubted it. I heard the eerie rustle of the wind through the seaweed of the clusterous forest far below me, and then, in front of me, the more ordinary sound of a door opening. "Lemony Snicket," said a voice. I turned to look at the girl who had spoken. "What's the news, Moxie?" "You tell me," she said. "You're the one who showed up at my door." I squinted into the dim sky until I could see the faint, thick line of the hawser stretched out above me and angling down the hill. Why not, I thought, and turned back to Moxie Malahan. "I'd like to extend an invitation," I said. She gave me a small smile. "Oh yes? For what?" "For a burglary taking place this evening at your home," I said, and walked through the door. And now, chapter 6 of All the Wrong Questions. "That's a very kind invitation, Snicket," Moxie said to me, "but I'm not sure if it counts as a burglary if the item being stolen isn't treasured by its owner." "What do you mean?" I asked her. Moxie blinked at me under the brim of her hat. "You know what I mean, Snicket. You're here to steal the abominating beast, aren't you?" "How did you know?" Moxie walked to her typewriter, which sat in its usual spot in the stairway with a sheet of paper still rolled into it. She scanned the paper to reread what she had typed earlier. "A stranger knocked on my door," she said, "with an older woman who was briefly pretending to be his wife. The stranger asked to see a particular item and was clearly surprised that I showed it to him. And here you are, talking about burglary. So..." "You're a very good journalist," I told her. "Flattery bores me, Snicket. Are you here to steal the statue or not?" "Yes," I decided to say. "Do you mind terribly?" Her smile got quite a bit bigger. "Not at all," she said, and leaned against the open door of the lighthouse. She adjusted a knob on her typewriter and then looked me straight in the eye. She wasn't taller than I was, but I still had to look up to meet her gaze, as I had been taught never to do. "Lemony Snicket, I think it's time you tell me exactly what's going on." "Are you really writing this up for the newspaper?" I asked. "I thought the Stained Lighthouse was out of business." "I'm staying in practice as a journalist," she said. "Then, when I leave this town, I'll be ready to join a newspaper." "When your mother sends for you," I said. "Stop stalling, Snicket. What exactly is going on?" "There's someone who's taken an interest in the statue of the abominating beast," I said, protecting the name of my client as I had been requested to do. "This person has said that the statue is theirs and is worth upward of a great deal of money. I don't think that's true. I think the statue has been in your family for a very long time, since the days of Lady Malahan, and I think if it were very valuable, it wouldn't be covered in a sheet with a bunch of dusty, forgotten items. But it doesn't matter what I think. So I'm going to stay here until midnight, when my associate will arrive, and we will take the abominating beast and escape down the hill on the hawser, and then my assignment will be over." Moxie had been typing at a furious pace, but now she stopped and looked at me. "This person," she said, "who's interested in the abominating beast. Do they live here in Stained by the Sea?" "Yes," I said incorrectly. "Why do you ask?" Moxie walked across the room to a small desk and, with some difficulty, pulled open a drawer stuffed with papers. "There is a drawer like this in every house in the world." She sifted through the papers with an expert eye and finally found what she was looking for. "Look at this thing," she said. This thing was a telegram dated 6 months before my graduation. It was addressed to Moxie's father, sent from a town I'd never heard of. In the old code of telegram writing, the end of each sentence was marked with "stop," which made the message even more confusing than it already was. "Greetings, sir. Stop. I am very interested in a certain statue I believe is in your home. Stop. I believe it is called the Abominating Beast. Stop. If you are willing to sell it to me, I believe you will be pleased with the price I am willing to pay. Stop. Please reply at your earliest convenience. Stop. And message." I believe is in your home. I read out loud. I believe it is called the Abominating Beast. I believe you will be pleased. That's a lot of belief. What did your father reply? My father never saw this telegram, Moxie said. When it was sent, I'd already started handling all his correspondence. Well, did you reply? I couldn't. Stained by the Sea's only telegram dispatch closed its door due to ink shortages the day after this telegram arrived. So, for all you know, this person has tried to send you many more telegrams. For all I know, yes. Did you investigate this at all? Moxie shook her head. There wasn't much to investigate, she said. The telegram is unsigned, and that town is quite a ways away, and frankly, 6 months ago, I had far more pressing matters than a statue nobody cares about. I didn't press her about her pressing matters. The writer of the telegram and the person who hired me might be the same person. Whoever they are, Moxie said, they're welcome to that old thing. Nobody has to go to the trouble of burglary. Not according to my chaperone, I said. Well, in that case, what are we going to do until midnight? At last, it was a question I could answer. I was hoping we could have dinner, I said. I've scarcely eaten today. I'm afraid I don't have much in the house, Moxie said. My father said he was going to go to the market today, but he never got out of his robe. I'm afraid all we have is a great deal of wilted basil. Do you have a bulb of garlic, a lemon, a cup of walnuts, Parmesan cheese, pasta of some kind, and a fair amount of olive oil? I think so, Moxie said, although I think the cheese might be Asiago. Even better, I said, and I followed her into the lighthouse's small kitchen, which was piled with dirty dishes and stacks of typewritten pages. Moxie cleared away the mess, and I put the walnuts in the oven to toast, along with some peeled garlic coated in olive oil. I put a pot of water on to boil while Moxie looked in the fridge for something to drink. I was hoping for root beer, but all she could find was some cranberry juice, which tasted all right, but just all right. Together, we plucked the leaves of the basil from the stems, grated the cheese, and squeezed the juice from the lemon, pausing to pick out the seeds with the tines of a fork decorated with an image of the abominating beast. Then, I put the pasta into the boiling water and mixed the remaining ingredients together, and soon we were sitting at the small wooden table, which wobbled slightly from a chipped leg, eating big bowls of orecchiette al pesto. It was just what I needed. I finished, wiped my mouth, and leaned back in my chair, which was just as wobbly. Moxie finished her cranberry juice. So? Do you know, I asked her, the orecchiette is Italian for little ears? I know it's just the shape of the noodle, but some people don't like the idea of eating a big bowl of... That's not what I mean, and you know it, Snicket. Why does someone want a statue everyone else has forgotten? I wouldn't know, I said. She reached over and opened up her typewriter to add a few sentences to her summary. There's something going on that we can't see. That's usually the case, I said. The map is not the territory. What does that mean? It's an adult expression for the muddle we're in. Adults never tell children anything. Children never tell adults anything either, I said. The children of this world and the adults of this world are in entirely separate boats, and only drift near each other when we need a ride from someone or when someone needs us to wash our hands. Moxie smiled at this and began to type. I meant to stack the dirty plates in the sink, but I liked staying at the table and watching her at work. Do you like that? I asked her. Typing up what happens in the world? Yes, I do, Moxie said. Do you like what you do, Lemony Snicket? I stared out the kitchen's lone window. The moon had risen like a wide eye. I do what I do, I said, in order to do something else. I was certain she would ask more questions, but we were interrupted by the lonely and familiar clanging of the bell. Moxie frowned at the clock, with a face like that of an angry seahorse. There's not usually an alarm at this hour, she said. When does it usually ring? It depends. For a while it seemed like it was ringing less and less frequently, but lately it started up again like gangbusters. Who rings it anyway? Moxie stood in her chair to reach a high shelf. The bell tower is over on Offshore Island, where there used to be a fancy boarding school that everyone called Top Drawer. I always thought that was a curious expression, I said. After all, the most interesting things are usually in the bottom drawer. Moxie smiled in agreement. Back then the bell was rung by the student valedictorian, but Wade Academy closed some time ago. Now the bell is rung by someone from the Coast Guard, I think, or maybe it's the Octopus Council. She took 2 masks down from the shelf and handed one to me. Don't worry, Snicket. We have plenty of spares. You won't get salt lung. Salt lung? That's what the bell is for, she explained. When the wind rises, it carries salt deposits left behind on the floor of the sea, which can be dangerous to breathe. The masks filter the salt out of the air." "I heard the masks were for water pressure," I said. Moxie frowned into her mask. "Where did you hear that?" "From Miss Theodora Markson," I said. "Where did you hear about salt lung?" "Some society put out a pamphlet," Moxie said, gesturing to the stuffed drawer. We put on our masks and faced each other. "I don't much like talking with these on," she said. "Shall we read until we hear the all clear?" I gave her a masked nod of agreement, and she led me into a small room where the walls were stuffed with bookshelves and a large floor lamp stood in the middle. A big bulb cast a bright circle of light from under a shade decorated with a creature I was getting tired of looking at. There were 2 large chairs to sit in, one piled with more typewritten pages, and the other surrounded by thick, sad-looking books on the decline of the newspaper industry and how to raise a daughter all by yourself. On the carpet, I could see marks on the floor where a 3rd chair had been dragged away. Moxie sat in her chair and put her typewritten notes in her lap and told me to help myself. I found a book that did nothing to relax my nerves. The story took place in some big woods where a little house was home to a medium-sized family who liked to make things. First, they made maple syrup, then they made butter, then they made cheese, and I shut the book. It was more interesting to think about stealing a statue and making my way down a hill on a hawser high above the ground. Interesting is a word which here means that it made me nervous. I walked over to the window and tried to see how far it was from the lighthouse to the Salas mansion, but the sun was long down, and outside was as black as the abominating beast itself. It wasn't much of a view, but I stared at it for quite some time. After a while, the bell clanged the all clear from the island tower, and I took off my mask and realized Moxie had fallen asleep behind hers. I slipped her mask off and found a blanket to put on her and went back to my staring. I thought maybe if I stared hard enough, I could see the lights of the city I had left so very far behind. This was nonsense, of course, but there's nothing wrong with occasionally staring out the window and thinking nonsense, as long as the nonsense is yours. Before long, the clock was abominating 12 times, but it was a quiet buzzing, so I heard Theodora's roadster outside without a problem. Moxie didn't stir, so I shook her shoulder slightly until her eyes flickered open. "Is it time?" she said. "It's time," I said, "but you would do me a great favor if you went to bed." "And miss all the fun?" she said. "Not on your life, Lemony Snicket." "You said yourself there's something going on we can't see," I said. "It might be something dangerous." "In any case, it's something interesting," Moxie said, "and I'm going to find out all about what." "Moxie, we can't burgle you if you're standing around watching. At least hide yourself." She stood up. "Where?" "You grew up in this lighthouse," I said. "You know all the best hiding places." She nodded, packed up her typewriter, and walked out of the room. I put out the lights and then opened the front door. The roadster was parked in front of the lighthouse, but I couldn't see Theodora. I walked a few steps out and called her name. My chaperone emerged from the night, crouching along the ground as she made her way. She had changed her clothes and was wearing black pants and a black turtleneck sweater with black slippers on her feet and a small black mask over her eyes. Her immense hair was tied up in a complication of black ribbons, and her face was dusted with something black to help her blend in. I once saw a cat run up a chimney and then immediately come back down covered in soot to ruin the living room furniture, and I noticed several striking similarities between this memory and the woman who was moving stealthily toward me. "There are burglary clothes in your suitcase," she hissed. "Why aren't you wearing them? We don't want to attract attention." "Perhaps you should have parked someplace else," I said, pointing to the roadster. "Keep your voice down," she said. "We'll wake people up." One way to keep one's voice down is to stop talking altogether, which is also one way not to argue with somebody. I beckoned to Theodora, and we slipped into the house and made our way up the spiral staircase. Theodora pressing herself against the walls of the lighthouse and swiveling her head this way and that, and me walking like a normal person. I led her into the newsroom, removed the sheet, and pointed to the statue of the abominating beast. She gestured to me that I should be the one to take it. I gestured back that she was the chaperone and the leader of this caper. She gestured to me that I shouldn't argue with her. I gestured to her that I was the one who had gotten this into the house in the first place. She gestured to me that my predecessor knew that the apprentice should never argue with the chaperone or complain, and that I might model my own behavior after his. I gestured to her, asking her what the S stood for in her name, and she replied with a very rude gesture, and I grabbed the statue and tucked it into my vest. It was lighter than I thought it would be, and I felt less like a burglar and more like someone who is simply carrying an object from one place to another. I opened the window and reached a hand down into the darkness until I could feel the hawser rough and cold against my palm. This made me feel more like a burglar. I held it steady for Theodora to grab with both hands, and then lowered myself after her. I couldn't reach to shut the window, but I figured Moxie would do it once she came out of hiding. I wonder if she could see us now as we began to climb hand over hand along the hawser toward the Salas mansion at the bottom of the hill. We must have been strange shadows against the round white moon. The rustling of the clusterous forest grew softer as we got farther and farther away, and the still night air filled my throat. I was not as high up as I thought I would be, and the hawser stayed steady as we continued our descent. In the moonlight, I could see the trees below us, the thin branches all folded together like laced-up shoes, and the leaves looking lonely and uncomfortable. I could see the small white cottage with something glinting in one of its windows, some small object that was reflecting the light of the moon. What I did not see was a candle, as Theodora had told me there would be, to signal that all was clear. "Snicket," Theodora said, "this would be a good time to ask me a question." "Why?" I tried. "Because I am somewhat afraid of heights," she answered, "and answering an apprentice's questions would be a good way to distract me." "Okay," I said, and thought for a moment. "Do you think this is the way the statue was stolen?" "Absolutely," Theodora said. "The Malahans must have climbed down the hawser, grabbed the statue, and gone back out the way they came." "I thought you said they came in from the parlor," I said, "by sawing a hole in the ceiling and letting gravity do the rest." "That was an early theory of mine, yes," Theodora said. "But at least I was half right. Gravity is involved. This would be a much harder climb if we were going up this hill instead of down." What Theodora said was true. It would have been much harder to move hand over hand up the cable, but she had also said the thieves had gone back out the way they came. Arguing with my chaperone, however, probably would not have distracted her from her condition. There was a word for a fear of heights, I knew, but I couldn't think of it. Something phobia. "How do you think the thieves got into the Salas mansion?" I asked. "Through one of the windows of the library, of course," Theodora said. "The hawser goes right there." "Mrs. Salas said the windows are always latched," I reminded her. "Well, they're not latched now," Theodora said. "Look, the butler is giving us the signal that all is clear." Sure enough, I could see the faint shape of the open window right where the hawser ended, and in the middle of that shape was a faint light. Hydrophobia? I thought. No, Snicket, that's the fear of water. The light did not look like a candle, as it was not flickering, and it was bright red in color. A bright red light reminded me of something that I also could not quite remember. Agoraphobia, I thought. No, Snicket, that's the fear of wide open spaces. "We're almost there," Theodora said. "In a minute the abominating beast will be returned to its rightful owner, and this case will be closed." I did not answer, because it had come to me all at once, like a light turning on. It was the red flashlight the officers Mitchum had on top of their car, and acrophobia is the word for a fear of heights. I let go of the hawser and fell straight down into the trees. Thus concludes Chapter 6 of Who Could That Be at This Hour by Lemony Snicket. Next show, we'll read Chapter 7. Lemony Snicket will meet a new character, and the plot will thicken considerably. Tune in, and on to Mackenzie.
And I will be reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Right now we're in Chapter 5. Just a recap, Harry is no longer with the Dursleys. He's with Hagrid, and they are going to go get his school supplies for Hogwarts, and they have just entered the Leaky Cauldron. I'll read a couple sentences. "Good Lord," said the bartender, peering at Harry. Can it be?" The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old bartender. "Harry Potter. What an honor." He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed toward Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and the next moment Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter. I can't believe I'm meeting you at last." "So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud." "Always wanted to shake your hand. I'm all of a flutter." "Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Daedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Daedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. "You bowed to me once in a shop." "He remembers!" cried Daedalus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me!" Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crockford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward, very nervously, one of his eyes twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." Potter, stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" Defense against the dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. Not that you need that, eh, Potter?" He laughed nervously. "You'll be getting all your equipment, I suppose. I've got to pick up a new book on vampires myself." He looked terrified at the very thought. But the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the babble. "Must get on. Lots to buy. Come on, Harry." Doris Crockford shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through the bar and out into a small, walled courtyard, where there was nothing but a trash can and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told you, didn't I? Told you was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh, yeah. Poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books, but then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. They say he met vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the students, scared of his own subject. Now where's me umbrella?" "Vampires? Hags?" Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the trash can. 3 up, 2 across, he muttered. "Right, stand back, Harry." He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered. It wriggled. In the middle, a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were facing an archway large enough for even Hagrid, an archway onto a cobbled street that twisted and turned out of sight. "Welcome," said Hagrid, "to Diagon Alley." He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, and a sign hanging over them. "Yeah, you'll be needing one," said Hagrid, "but we gotta get your money first." Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside the apothecary was shaking her head as they passed, saying, "Dragon liver, 17 sickles an ounce. They're mad." A low, soft hooting came from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Aelops Owl Emporium. Tawny, Screech, Barn, Brown, and Snowy." Several boys about Harry's age had their noses pressed against a window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "the new Nimbus 2000, fastest ever." There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes, tottering piles of spellbooks, quills, and rolls of parchment, potion bottles, globes of the moon. "Gringotts," said Harry. They had reached a snowy white building that towered over the other little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was... "Yeah, that's a goblin," said Hagrid quietly, as they walked up the white stone steps toward him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and, Harry noticed, very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words graved upon them. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take, but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there." "Like I said, you'd be mad trying to rob it," said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on high stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins in brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Morning," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's safe." "You have his key, sir." "Got it here somewhere," said Hagrid, and he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of moldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on their right weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. "Got it," said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. "That seems to be in order. And I've also got a letter from Professor Dumbledore," said Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest. "It's about the you-know-what in Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. "Very well," he said, handing it back to Hagrid. "I'll have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook!" Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back inside his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook toward one of the doors leading off the hall. "What's the you-know-what in Vault 713? Harry asked. "Can't tell you that," said Hagrid mysteriously. "Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trusted me. Warn my job's worth to tell you that." Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway, lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downward, and there were little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling up the tracks toward them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and were off. At first they just hurled through a maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember left, right, left, middle fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way, because Griphook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of a passage, and twisted around to see if it was a dragon. But too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from the ceiling and floor. "I never know," Harry called to Hagrid over the noise of the cart. "What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite?" "Stalagmite's got an M in it," said Hagrid. "And don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm going to be sick." He did look very green, and when the cart stopped at last beside a small door in the passage wall, Hagrid got out and had to lean against the wall to stop his knees from trembling. Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze knuts. "All yours," smiled Hagrid. All Harry's. It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they'd have had it from him faster than blinking. How often had they complained how much Harry cost them to keep? And all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him, buried deep under London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some of it into a bag. "The gold ones are galleons," he explained. 17 silver sickles to a galleon and 29 knuts to a sickle. "It's easy enough." "Right, that should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for you." He turned to Griphook. "Vault 713 now, please. And can we go more slowly?" "One speed only," said Griphook. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurled round tight corners. They went rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leaned over the side to try to see what was down in the dark bottom, but Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. "Stand back," said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. "If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there," said Griphook. "How often do you check to see if anyone's inside?" Harry asked. "About once every 10 years, said Griphook with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault. Harry was sure, and he leaned forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least. But at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped up in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but knew better than to ask. "Come on, back in this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if I keep my mouth shut," said Hagrid. One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons there were to a pound to know that he was holding more money than he'd had his whole life. More money than even Dudley had ever had. "Might as well get your uniform," said Hagrid, nodding toward Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. "Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slipped off for a pick-me-up in the leaky cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts." He did still look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop alone, feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch, dressed all in mauve. "Hogwarts, dear?" she said when Harry started to speak. "Got a lot here. Another young man being fitted up just now, in fact." In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale pointed face was standing on a footstool, while a second witch pinned up his long black robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on a stool next to him, slipped a long robe over his head, and began to pin to the right length. "Hello," said the boy. "Hogwarts, too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father's next door buying my books, and my mother's up the street looking at wands," said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "No," said Harry. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No," said Harry again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. "I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say, I agree. Know what house you'll be in yet?" "No," said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. "I say, look at that man," said the boy suddenly, nodding toward the front window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry and pointing at 2 large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. "That's Hagrid," said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," said the boy, "I've heard of him. He's a sort of servant, isn't he?" "He's the gamekeeper," said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. "Yes, exactly. I've heard he's sort of savage, lives in a hut on the school grounds, and every now and then he gets drunk, tries to do magic, and ends up setting fire to his bed." "I think he's brilliant," said Harry coldly. "Do you?" said the boy with a slight sneer. "Why is he with you? Where are your parents?" "They're dead," said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with the boy. "Oh, sorry," said the other, not sounding sorry at all. "But they were our kind, weren't they?" "They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean." "I really don't think they should let the other sort in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get the letter. Imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway?" But before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, "That's you done, my dear," and Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. "Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose," said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate his ice cream. Hagrid had bought him. Chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. "What's up?" said Hagrid. "Nothing," Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry cheered up a bit when he found a bottle of ink that changed color as he wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, "Hagrid, what's Quidditch?" "Blimey, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you know. Not knowing about Quidditch." "Don't make me feel worse," said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy from Madame Malkin's, and he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed in. "You're not from a Muggle family. If he'd known who you were, he's grown up knowing your name if his parents are wizarding folk. You saw what everyone in the leaky cauldron was like when they saw you. Anyway, what does he know about it? Some of the best I ever saw were the only ones with magic in them in a long line of Muggles. Look at your mum. Look at what she had for her sister." "So what is Quidditch?" "It's our sport, wizard sport. It's like soccer in the Muggle world. Everyone follows Quidditch. Played up in the air on broomsticks, and there's 4 balls. Sort of hard to explain the rules." "And what are Slytherin and Hufflepuff?" "Schoolhouses. There are 4. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers, but I bet I'm in Hufflepuff," said Harry gloomily. "Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin," said Hagrid darkly. "There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was one." Sorry. You know who was at Hogwarts?" "Years and years ago," said Hagrid. They bought Harry school books in a shop called Flourish and Blotts, where the shelves were stacked to the ceiling with books as large as paving stones bound in leather. Books the size of postage stamps and covers of silk, books full of peculiar symbols, and a few books with nothing in them at all. Even Dudley, who never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these. Hagrid almost had to drag Harry away from curses and counter-curses. Bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges, hair loss, jelly legs, tongue-tying, and much, much more, by Professor Vindictus Viridian. And that's all the time we have for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Thank you for listening again to Reading Radio, normally on KWCW 90.5 FM Walla Walla, and this week on Live from a Lambskin Rug. I'm Julian Weller.
And I'm Mackenzie Kessler.
And you will hear from us again soon, although probably Grant.
Yeah, I probably won't be here.
Have a good night.
Answer. She shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried. Stop. Stop.